Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. My name is Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
Hello, hello.
Today, we are going to be discussing what is literature and which modern books we think will be considered classics later on. This should be an interesting episode because neither of us have prepared for this discussion.
This is, the old, the kind of, I don't know if it's an analogy you're saying or whatever, but where it's like, if you put a bunch of monkeys in a room with keyboards, eventually one of them will type up Shakespeare.
Yes.
We're those monkeys. This is our keyboard. We're not typing up Shakespeare.
There will be no Shakespeare today. Full disclosure, not a big Shakespeare fan. I don't know how you feel about that.
I haven't read Shakespeare since high school.
Yeah.
I remember when I was reading Infinite Jest a couple of years ago, or last year, there's a lot of that book that's an allusion to Hamlet, or influenced by it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just kind of read Hamlet and get some background info. I found a copy online for $3. And then I saw there was like a book of the complete works of Shakespeare that was only $4. And I was like, oh, I'll get this. Everything's related to Shakespeare in some way or another. Like everyone ties back to him. And then it just sat on my shelf and then I sold it for $5. So
arbitrage.
Real literary shark over here.
Yeah. I reject the notion that there's only a set amount of stories that can be told and they all stem from either the Bible or Shakespeare. I'm not discounting the influence that those two things have had on writing in general and storytelling in general, but I do not believe that to be true. There's a book, I'm going to totally botch the details on this, but there's a book about storytelling. It's very famous. It's like the 10 somethings of storytelling. And it's actually the kind of the foundation of a lot of Jordan Peterson's quote unquote philosophy about stories and the way humans think about stories. And it stems from biblical literature. And Jordan Peterson's argument is essentially distills down to that these stories are universal truths because they appear in every single culture. Even if that culture didn't have Christianity, there's something so similar and akin that they must be innate to humanity or programmed into our DNA, or maybe there is some type of higher power that's instilling these narratives within us. What's funny about that is, and that is somewhat largely true as far as there are lots of cultures that have similar origin stories, even if they don't participate in what we consider Christianity or an Abrahamic religion. But there are also cultures that don't have that at all. And so I don't believe you can say there's only certain, types of stories that can be told. And it's funny because I just had this conversation with our friend John N from the gym, who is a big movie guy, and we both watched The Killer.
I just watched that last night.
What did you think of that?
I liked it. I wasn't blown away. I'm not a big movie buff in general, but I liked it. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was well done.
So it's David Fincher. It's going to look good. It's going to be a well-made movie.
Yes.
I thought the story was very unoriginal and uncompelling. And John had said, well, there's really only 5 stories anyway, types of stories anyway. So how original do you want it to be? And I'm like, I reject that notion completely. Hey, Editor Tony here. And just wanted to clarify, our friend John actually said that there are people like critics and other well-known figures in the movie or storytelling world that believe there's only 4 or 5 sets of types of stories. He does not actually share that opinion. So wanted to clear that up. I understand that there's very common types of stories.
Right.
Love stories and blah, 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 whatever you want to say. But I don't believe that we can say, look at Gravity's Rainbow. And I told myself I will be so impressed with us if we can get through a whole episode without mentioning this book. However, you can't read that book and tell me that fits nicely into
You
one
know,
of the 5 types of stories.
Right. The thing is, that's funny about that is I had that thought on my way over here because, like, we're obviously going to talk about modern works that are, in theory, going to end up becoming quote classics, and I was like, I mean, how do I not? I don't want to talk about Gravity's Rainbow anymore, but how do I not bring that up? But
we will maybe have to.
I'm glad that you broke the seal on that one, and now I don't have to be the one to do it.
One of these days, we will maybe impart a no Gravity's Rainbow rule on a single episode, but apparently it's not going to be today. So anyway, that's how I feel about Shakespeare. I appreciate the fact that it did inspire a lot of other things, but I just reject that notion that
I don't know. I think I don't disagree with you. I do think if you're just getting into reading more literary works, especially if it's quote classics, maybe stuff pre World War II or even pre 20th century. If there's an allusion to something and you're kind of struggling to figure out what it is, I would say there's a safe bet. It's either the Bible or Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
I think as you get into more modern works, as you get away from time periods where Christianity was a more central piece of society, or religion in general. I shouldn't just say Christianity, but as you get away from that, I think it's probably alluded to less. So I think as you get more modern or more esoteric and erudite, you're going to start to see different allusions to things that are also esoteric and erudite and avant-garde. But if you're reading, I mean, East of Eden's obviously a pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
But if you're reading like Steinbeck or, the Poisonwood Bible is one I had to read when I was in high school in AP Lit. And that was that whole class was like, how does this relate to Shakespeare or the Bible? So I think if you're reading again, your classic literature, I'm not saying it is or it is going to be an allusion to one of those things, but if you're unsure, it's kind of a safe bet. Like it might fall under that.
My question though is, let's say you read something like East of Eden or the Poisonwood Bible, which I'm not familiar with, and you don't know anything about the Bible. What are you missing out on exactly by not knowing those things?
Yeah. I mean, you might miss some of the bigger picture ideas, I think, but I don't think it would affect your ability to enjoy the book.
Right.
I don't know how you enjoy the Poisonwood Bible, but that's
not a fan, eh?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I
Is
think
that Barbara Kingsolver?
yes.
Okay.
I just remember, and I haven't read it since I was it would have been, it's going on 10 years now. But I was, a stupid high school kid. And I was just I didn't enjoy it. I didn't really like a lot of the characters. I thought they were just kind of whiny babies, things like that. And I was actually talking about this with someone the other day. It's probably one of those books that, maybe I should revisit now that I'm into reading a little bit more and literature more, but I just don't want to. I having reread or read Crime and Punishment a couple years ago. That was one I read in high school, and having read East of Eden 3 or 4 years ago, those were a few of the books that I read in high school and at least enjoyed enough to not complain about the assignment. Mm-hmm. Those were ones I wanted to revisit. Now that I have more of an appreciation for things like that, I didn't really want to feel like going back and rereading things I disliked to see if my opinion has changed. I wanted to see if books I enjoyed, if I still enjoyed them or if I enjoyed them more, how my engagement with them changed as a hopefully more astute reader.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So.
All right, before we actually start to tackle today's topic, we will start with, as we normally do, what we're currently reading. So why don't you go first, Andy?
All right. So I'm still working my way through William T. Vollman's You Bright and Risen Angels. I am still enjoying it. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through, and I'm getting back into it a little bit. I don't know if it's just because work has been nuts for me lately, and I'm just kind of running on fumes, or if I'm hitting that point in the middle of any maximalist work where you're kind of like, let's get on with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But there were a couple chapters and sections that I had read recently that felt like kind of a drag, but I am still enjoying it a lot. I think, I alluded to this when we sat down last week, but this book is really turning me into a Vollmaniac, so to speak. I've also started yesterday, Thank You for Smoking by Christopher Buckley, it's been a fairly light, not necessarily light, but easier read. It's basically a satire of political lobbying. So the main character is a lobbyist for the tobacco industry. Mm-hmm. He has some friends that are lobbyists for alcohol related stuff. Another friend that's a gun lobbyist, but the main narrative centers around this guy that's a tobacco lobbyist, and it's just kind of a spoof of lobbying.
Was that a newer book?
No, it was published in 94.
Okay.
So, but it is there have been a couple times where I've been reading it and I had to like double check when it was published, because I was like, this seems...
People think that our political climate every year is the worst it's ever been, but it's really the same always.
Yeah. I think there's I don't remember what it was, but there was something in there that I think it might have had to do with like flying or terrorist attacks or something, and I was like, this had to be written post 9/11. Like, this is too...
Yeah.
And that's when I had to like flip back. And I was like, nope, 94.
Yeah. There were a few airline related terrorist things prior to 9/11.
I think just the way it seemed, like I said, a little bit too specific.
Yeah.
I had to double check it. I don't think I've read any. I have Maqroll next to me. I don't think I've read any of the novels since we last spoke. And earlier this week, I finished Wailing, Madness, Shame, and Death by W. Gavin. Wade is his name. W. Gavin is what's on the book. It's another recent entry in the Corona Samizdat catalog, and I really enjoyed that. That was a really good book.
Is it about whaling?
Kind of, sort of. So, Wailing, Madness, Shame, and Death is taken from a quote from Oedipus the King, or Oedipus Rex, or whatever the actual name of the play is, and it's the epigraph at the start of the novel. So it has some...
So we're talking whaling like crying.
Yes.
Not whaling as in
Correct.
Hunting whales for
Correct.
oil.
Yeah.
Okay. You can tell I'm from New England.
Right? I read that. That was really good. A lot of the books that I have read from them have this kind of experimental playfulness to them. There's usually some humor involved, things like that. And this was just kind of a dark, not uncomfortable read, but it was pretty heavy. Not something I've usually encountered with their output, but the writing was great. The narrative was really intriguing. I don't want to get into it too much because I don't want to say it's like a thriller where there's like twists and turns, but I don't want to spoil too much of it. But basically it starts off with, it takes place in Australia. It starts off with this young man that had like just graduated high school. The first like 2 or 3 pages are him having a conversation with his therapist and talking about how he like just found out some information that he's not really sure how to process. You learn in the next chapter, it's something his grandfather told him about his family's past, and it just kind of builds from there, and it really changes what he learns, really changes his outlook on life. It has a lot to do with like a lot of the book has to do with death, the kind of futility of life. I think I put this in my review. I had a kind of synopsis from the author. Let me see if I can pull it up because I think it'll make it kind of clear or clear things up a little bit. Wailing madness, shame, and death concerns the tragic implications of fatalism, the anticipatory futility of life, and ultimately time and its unknowability. So
you wrote that? It's beautiful.
I didn't write that. I wrote that in my review, quoting the author.
I was like, "Good job, Andy."
Yeah, no, that was not me. That was all Mr. Gavin.
All right.
But yeah, it's a really good book. I think if anyone is familiar with Corona Samizdat, then they'll probably like it.
Cool.
I think also Rick Harsh, the editor of CS, kind of compared it in a, tangentially to Cormac McCarthy. So I think if you like some of his stuff, you will also enjoy this book.
Rick is an interesting guy. He seems to know everything.
He sure is.
He always comments on these episodes. So shout out to Rick. And he'll say, "Oh, you have to read this," or "This reminds me of that." And I'm like, dude, I don't even. Like,
he's a very well read guy.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Seems
It's
to be
very
well
impressive.
traveled. So yeah.
Cool. I'm currently only reading 2 books. I'm reading Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa, which is kind of a epic from Japan. It was written in the 30s, and it's about a real samurai named Musashi, not to be confused with. The actual samurai also wrote some texts back, in feudal Japan. I think he wrote the Book of the Five Rings.
Yep, that sounds right.
Is from his, I don't know if it's from his diaries or whatever. I have not read it, but it's about 1,000 pages. It's not really what I expected, and I do think it actually demonstrates what we were just talking about a few minutes ago about how different cultures really do have different types of stories. I think in the Western world, a lot of storytelling is self-centered. There's a lot of stories that are literally just about some kid's childhood and growing up in this middle America or whatever, which is cool. You can make a lot of interest from that, and I think people connect with that because they've gone through something similar. Where I've noticed with Asian literature, specifically Japan, is they don't really care about characters as much. It's more about the overall story. And the stories are very big. They're very large, sprawling concepts. Kind of similar to, obviously Shogun by James Clavell is written by an Englishman, but he kind of nailed that. Like, it's not really you think Shogun's about Blackthorn,
Right.
and it's not. He's not the main character.
He kind of drives the plot along, but he's not.
Right. You spend a lot of the book being like, what's going to happen to this guy? And then you kind of realize it doesn't matter.
Right.
It really, it matters, but it's not the main focus. And then he has a few more novels that are all part of that series that don't even take place in Japan. They
Right.
move on across hundreds of years. And so Musashi is kind of similar to that. And there was this one point of the book where there's a character that they literally arrest and put into a cell. And there's no page break. There's no chapter end, nothing. Literally the next sentence after he gets incarcerated is 3 years later. It just jumps 3 years. And it's so jarring. And it seems on its surface like this is just poor writing. But it's not. It's just how they tell stories, because the story isn't necessarily about this one dude that got arrested. It's
Right.
about the overall theme of what's happening in the world and the lesson that we can all kind of apply to our lives. That it's not as self-centered. So it's an interesting book. If you read the reviews, you can kind of see it reflected. People are like, the characters are kind of two-dimensional. And it's like, because they're kind of like NPCs. They're non-playable characters, you know what I mean? They're tools more than anything else, because it's not really about them specifically. It's more about the major themes and the broader story. So it's interesting. It's much easier to read than I thought it was going to be. So for a 1,000-page book, any long book can be intimidating just because of its length.
Right.
But it's super, super easy read. Like I'll probably finish it up in a week or two.
That's good.
And then complete antithesis of that, I started Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov, which his most famous work is The Master and the Margarita, which you read and didn't care for, you said?
Correct. Yeah, I think it was one of those novels where like a lot of it just kind of went over my head.
Sure.
Like I think I just kind of missed the point of a lot of it. I didn't like dislike the writing or anything. I think, parts of the narrative just like didn't connect. And actually it's funny that we're talking about this because it kind of relates to our conversation about the Bible. There's a lot of references in there to Jesus and Judas and was it Pontius Pilate? Mm-hmm. I think there's actually like kind of retellings of their kind of collective story within there, and it was just a lot of stuff like I was unfamiliar with. I knew enough to like recognize that this character's Jesus, but like I kind of missed the point of what he was doing with all of that. So again, this is like what I said last week when I was talking about how I didn't like Grapes of Wrath. Like I'm not going to sit here and critique and tear down one of what is generally considered one of the high points of Russian literature or more modern Russian lit. But like it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think Bulgakov and Nabokov kind of are considered more of like the new school Russian literature giants. It's not that long of a book. It's 125 pages. I just started it this morning.
Yeah.
And maybe 15, 20 pages in. I'm enjoying it quite a bit, but also it's a short story more. It's a novella.
Right.
So sometimes the author has to move things along a little bit quicker than a longer book. You might not enjoy as much.
Right.
Just based on sometimes authors just draw things out too much in a longer work because they know they have the pages to do it. So
yeah.
So that's what I'm reading. So
I think a lot of this is a lot of Bulgakov's work from what I can tell, but a lot of it is like critiques of the Soviet Union.
It's very on the nose in this book.
And kind of satirizing the Soviet Union. And that's what I had read a lot of what the Master and Margarita is supposed to be. And like I didn't see how, I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's not what they say. But like I just didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on how it was spoofing anything.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of where I missed the connection and what led to my disliking it. But
this book is about a homeless dog, Mutt, begging for scraps on the street. So it's a little more on the nose, I guess, than the other stuff. I think the writing is very clever so far. I'm enjoying it. Like it's told from the perspective of the dog. So it's pretty interesting. So, all right, let's get into today's topic. What is literature? And to answer that question, because neither of us have an education in English or anything related to, let's go to Google and ask Google, what defines literature? And according to Wikipedia, literature is any collection of written work, which is not giving us much here.
no.
All right, Andy, what is literature to you?
It's a collection of written works. Oh man, this is tough.
I can take a stab at it first.
Yeah, you go ahead.
For me, I just want to say that I don't think there is or can be a clear line drawn
Correct.
to what is and what is not literature. I think a lot of it stems from what the intention of the writer, of the author was when they created the work. And a great example, I think, is our good friend Dan Lawton, who we had on one of our very early episodes. He's a thriller writer. And Dan was very transparent about his pursuit to make a career out of writing thrillers. Mm-hmm. And he talked about one of his works, Plum Springs, which I have, which I'm going to read before the end of this year. He said that was his most literary work, where he really tried to push the style and just, and the term that you use that I love, the pyrotechnics, I guess, of the writing, really try to make elegant prose. And he said that was my least successful book.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of people would kind of turn their nose up at, oh, you're writing just to sell books. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like,
no.
If that's what you want to do, like, that's great. Then that's what you need to do. You need to write in a way that is appealing to your audience. And what's interesting to me about this is we have this romanticized idea of art in modern day that true art isn't for the pursuit of money, but that historically doesn't really like check out. A great example is like a painter like Rembrandt. Like, these people, we look at their works now and we go, oh, this is like unbelievable art. But a lot of the paintings that famous painters like Rembrandt created were commissioned works.
Right.
And they often flattered their subjects with their portraits by removing blemishes, making them look more fit or whatever, because these were wealthy people that were paying them to do these works. And only now, hundreds of years later, do we go, oh, this is true art. But it's like, no, dude, he was trying to make some money.
Right. It's funny that I read a book earlier this year called Saint Sebastian's Abyss. It's about these two, they're art critics, and they're just kind of like going back and forth. They're both have kind of based their career around this fictional painting, Saint Sebastian's Abyss. And I can't remember the name of the fictional artist, but he's got that and two other paintings that have survived. And there's records of him doing other artwork. But as far as anyone can tell, like, he was just taking a cheap commission, would make the painting, and then sell it off so he had enough money to go to the brothel.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. These people were just regular people trying to make ends meet.
right.
Yeah. So going back to that kind of line of thinking, I do think that the more you write with the intention of, I don't care if this is, if you write like, this is kind of for no one but myself, that's where it starts to become more literary.
Yeah.
Where if you start to say, I want to sell more books, or I want to appeal to a certain audience. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let me just be very clear about that. There's nothing wrong with that. But that is not what I would call as literary or as traditional literature.
Right. I think I was thinking about it as well. I think it kind of, the one thing that kind of popped into my head, I think it's from like an old congressional hearing or something like that. They were talking about kind of lewd and obscene content.
Was it with Dee Snider from Twisted Sister?
I don't know, but where it's kind of that sort of famous quote where he's like, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it.
I do think that is what
was that.
I think it, yeah.
But like I kind of was thinking about it in relation to this conversation. Like, I don't know how well I could define good literature, but like, I know it when I see it, or I know when I like read something and I'm like, this is just a general work of fiction. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I did look at the dictionary.com, and there is, I think, a much closer definition to what we're looking for.
Okay.
Writings in which writings in which expression and form in connection with ideas of permanent and universal interest are characteristic or essential features, as poetry, novels, history, biography, and essays.
I don't disagree with that, but then there's also things that I would not consider literature that would fall under that umbrella. So read that one more time.
Writings in which expression and form in connection with ideas of permanent and universal interest are characteristic or essential features, as poetry, novels, history, biography, and essays.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of a good definition, because it's saying this isn't necessarily about what happened to character A and B, but it's about the broader idea or theme or point.
I think that's kind of something that I had considered as well. Like, it's not, at least from the lens of like fiction, it's not just the story. It's just not just the narrative.
Right. You're not reading it just to find out what happens to the characters.
Right.
Right.
And, it might be something along the lines of like where the author is using the narrative to kind of convey some ideas or themes he has about human nature, about society, about things that are wrong with either of those two things, or just bigger picture ideas, or to convey certain emotions or things like that. Or you have others where maybe some more modern experimental type stuff where like there's a novel there, but they're kind of more being playful with it, like kind of using a story to play with how the idea of a novel is constructed, or
right.
The style of writing is very experimental.
I asked ChatGPT what defines literature. What I always find interesting about ChatGPT is it always kind of starts every answer with "it depends." in a way, that's what they say. Literature is a broad term, but it defines it by 7 different points. Artistic and creative qualities. Literature is often characterized by its artistic use of language. Communication of ideas is number 2. Number 3 is enduring and universal themes. Number 4 is varied forms and genres. To expound on this, literature includes a wide range of forms such as novels, poetries, and plays. Probably just lifted that text right from wherever you were looking at, dictionary.com. Number 5, emotional and intellectual engagement. Number 6, reflection of society. And number 7, aesthetic and linguistic quality, which is kind of similar to what they said on point number 1, but the aesthetic quality of language, its rhythm, symbolism, imagery, and sound play a crucial role in distinguishing literary works from other forms of writing.
I think that's that last one you just said about the aesthetic quality of it. And then there was, what was the one a couple points above, something about engagement?
Emotional and intellectual engagement. Literature engages readers both emotionally and intellectually. I think for me, that's probably
that one. And then, like I said, the aesthetic thing at the end. I think those are kind of the big ones for me. I think the aesthetic, the line about aesthetics there kind of ties into what I had just said about how an author might use a narrative to play with the idea of how a novel is constructed, or they might use just like a story or a general narrative to, I don't want to say flex their writing chops, but like that it was kind of the vehicle for the actual writing itself.
Yeah.
They weren't just kind of like, it wasn't just like, oh, well, I can make a sentence sound good and look good on paper, but there has to be something there to make it interesting enough that you want to keep reading, aside from just the quality of the language.
Yeah, it's interesting because pop fiction. So we'll take what's the real popular one right now? Fourth Wing.
Yeah,
I know that I would not really like that book. And when I say I wouldn't like it, what I mean is I could probably read that and be entertained by it. I'm sure that book probably does a fine job of keeping you engaged as far as like, oh, what happens next? You know what I mean? But it's not really the type of book that I would read and be really satisfied afterwards. And I think the difference is you and I were talking earlier off camera about a guilty pleasure television show, Selling Sunset. That's the type of show where you can sit down and watch a whole season, just binge a whole season. You can, at the end, you would say, yeah, I was entertained. But the next month or even the next day, you're not going to be sitting there thinking, wow, I really, I can't stop thinking.
That was really stimulating.
Sunset. You know what I mean? It's not going to stick with you. It's not going to make you think, well, it does actually influence my perception of the world because I think these people are terrible. And the lengths at which people go to waste money on stupid things.
Absolutely.
I think this is very tangential, but the episode we were watching, they were touring a $100 million home that had a nightclub in it. Did you see that episode?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I could not stop thinking about how many meals you could feed people with.
Right.
With what it costs to build that. You could literally feed thousands of people for a year with what it costs. And I just thought to myself, that was such a waste.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. You kind of just said something about like binging it. Earlier this year, when I finished reading Gravity's Rainbow, like I think it was like a Saturday or Sunday morning, I wasn't trying to like binge read that because it was one you kind of obviously want to slow down and like engage with it as much as possible. But like, I think I got to a point where I was like, not that I wanted to finish it, but like I got so close to the end, like I just couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
And so
you have some inertia.
Right. And so I read the last 60, 70, maybe 100 pages. I don't think it was that much, but like a significant chunk of the end of the book up till the end one morning. And for anyone that has read it, like, that the text gets more, not necessarily fragmented, but scattered throughout as you progress through. It kind of loses as much of a central narrative as there is.
Oh, good. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. And, it gets hard to follow and understand what's going on at the end. And it's certainly maintains its difficulty through the final two parts, especially part 4. And I needed a palate cleanser. Like I needed something. Like I had done too much brain work.
Yeah, your brains were scrambled eggs.
So we binged the newest season of Selling Sunset. And
Perfect.
Like I just thought it was very funny to me, like the juxtaposition of what I was doing. Like on one hand, I was engaging with this like really highbrow piece of art. And on the other hand, I was sucked into the couch watching trashy reality TV.
Yeah. There's something to be said about it. Sometimes you need to decompress or disassociate, as you say. So I think that for me is you can kind of apply that to literature and writing in general. Like there's a lot of pop fiction that I think is probably entertaining. Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, I thought is kind of a great example of that. I did that on audiobook this year. And I loved it. I couldn't wait to get back in my car and keep listening because I wanted to know what happens next.
Right.
But that book had, for me, I didn't see any like greater meaning or grand narrative or anything like that to really sit with me. And almost all readers that I know continuously read and consume books voraciously. But I think genre readers do so more than people who are into quote unquote serious literature. And I think the reason for that is because the emotional impact or the cognitive impact of those books is not as long lasting.
Right.
And again, this whole episode I'm going to be giving disclaimers about because this sounds incredibly pretentious. And I don't want to poo-poo what people enjoy reading, because I encourage reading in all ways. But I just think that if you engaged with some works that were maybe more intellectually challenging, I mean challenging the way that maybe challenges your beliefs or challenges the limits of your intellectualism, you wouldn't feel the need to read 10-part series books that are just like the same thing kind of over and over and over again. Because that's kind of what happens, right? A lot of times these books in pop fiction get written as a standalone. They sell wildly, and then they go, oh, we got to write more of these because people are going to keep buying them. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's that. I think the reality TV is a good analogy. You know, like I'm not going to watch Selling Sunset and then really be thinking about it deeply as soon as I turn the television off. And you can sit down and you can watch one episode in the middle of a season and be entertained by it. You don't need to know what's happened before or after.
Right.
And I feel that way about a lot of books, like in series.
I can tell you what is going to happen. I haven't finished the entire new season yet. I can tell you what's going to happen in the next one.
Right.
They're going to go look at a wildly overpriced house.
Yep.
They're going to argue over some catty nonsense.
Yep.
They're going to like pretend to make up.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a big fight at some lavish party or dinner or something.
But we're going to love every
I'm
minute
going to
of
love every second of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think, and I feel like that's probably, like you just kind of said, the case with a lot of popular fiction or, pop fiction. I think a lot of that type of stuff is going to fall under what we were talking about earlier, where there's like 5 types of stories.
Yeah.
In some way or another, like, I don't think maybe formulaic is the wrong word to use, but like I feel like if you have read enough of those types of books, you can probably figure out what's going to happen in the next one, or have a loose idea of how things are going to go.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe you'll just be entertained, which is fine. Like I
there's nothing wrong with pure entertainment. There's
Right.
a definite time and place for that.
You know, I have been in the outside world. I know that it's not great out there. Like, and if you want to, you know, disassociate from that with just like a fantasy story, or, you know, a thriller or a romance or whatever.
It all comes back to why you read.
Right. Exactly. I don't particularly like to read for entertainment alone. I'd like to have to get something out of it at the end of it, other than just a good story.
Yeah.
Which I think we talked at length kind of about this in our first episode, but I think that's kind of why I have gravitated towards the types of work that I like to read, is because I like to see how an author can play with the structure of a novel, how they can, the quality of their writing, the way they might experiment with language, the aesthetic value of a novel. And I'd also like to engage with it on an intellectual level.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the reason I read personally is very multifaceted, but probably the primary driver of why I like to read is I am constantly curious about the world, and I think I'm a bit in wonder about the world, as far as the world just kind of amazes me and life kind of amazes me, and I feel almost guilty to an extent if I'm not constantly pushing myself to learn more. I just feel like my life would be a bit of a waste. You know, we're all going to be turned to little specks of dust and forgotten eventually, but it just seems like it's kind of like my responsibility while I'm here to try to take this gift of intelligence and self-awareness that humans have that other creatures don't, and just really explore that. We talked very briefly at the beginning about how I went and saw Mark Normand last night, and it occurred to me while I was at the show, and I should have known this going into it, that his comedy attracts a certain type of person, and that type of person is not for me. And it's like, I can appreciate why somebody would think some of the jokes are funny, but to me, they're just a little bit obvious. And it's like, if that punchline was a just rolling on the floor knee slapper for you, then you just don't know that much about the world. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way for me to say that without sounding like an absolute condescending prick. But I just think that, like, I just personally, for whatever reason, there's something inside of me that can never be satisfied with what I know.
Right.
And I just want to be pushed more. And there are very few better ways to really get someone else's point of view than writing.
Right.
And then, of course, you read books that are written by incredibly intelligent people, and they communicate in such a higher way that it pushes you then to really start to think about the way you communicate, or you learn new words, or it just really pushes you intellectually, it keeps your mind sharp. So for me, there's just a lot of benefits. And then if I can also be entertained at the same time, which is the case with a lot of serious literature,
Right.
then that's just the icing on the cake.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the only thing that needs to happen.
Right. I think it's a different kind of entertainment, you know, because I do think if you're engaging with the work at a certain level, in theory, you should be entertained by it,
right?
Or there's enough interest on your part to keep going. Like, I've read books or started books where, you know, it takes some effort to understand what's going on, some work on the part of the reader to parse out the language and understand it, and the structure and things like that. But at the same time, if it's just like too difficult, or there's not an interesting narrative there, like, I'm not just going to read something just to kind of like, because I think the language is really good.
Yeah.
It might carry me on a little bit longer than if it was a poorly written narrative and the writing itself wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's good quality of writing, like, I might hang on for a little bit, see if I get more drawn into the plot, or maybe the actual quality of the writing just continues to grow and grow and grow. And before I know it, I'm 80% through the book.
Right.
And, so yeah, I think if you think about it, like, kind of to go back to the TV analogy, like, there's stuff I watch to be simply entertained, like Selling Sunset, or, you know, pick a sitcom that I have seen 18 times and am just going to watch when I need something on in the background. And then there's shows like, you know, something you might see on like HBO, like something like, I know it's super popular right now, but like a Westworld, or, you know, White Lotus was super popular. Mm. I really enjoyed both seasons of that. Some of the stuff that's been on FX, you know, they did that show with Jeff Bridges, The Old Man.
Mm-hmm. How was that? Never saw it.
You didn't?
No. I'm a huge Jeff Bridges fan.
I thought we had like talked about it. It was good. I liked it, man. You should watch it. Mm. Maybe it was just everyone else in the group chat that watched it.
Yeah,
but
I
you.
think so, yeah.
You know, everybody, it seems like everybody really that has watched it really loves The Bear.
Mm.
I haven't.
Somebody asked me last night if I'd seen that.
I kind of have fallen off with the second season just because it wasn't, because disliked or anything. Life happens.
Yeah.
But I think all of those shows, they're entertaining, and maybe to kind of go back to the some of the definitions about literature we read earlier, maybe they don't have like lofty ideas and themes that are kind of speaking to society in general, but they're certainly intellectual and engaging. You're engaging with them in a way that's not just like sitting there watching it, gawking at how can someone afford this house, or what the hell kind of outfit is that. So I think it kind of plays to that effect too. Like, it's just a difference in the form of art.
Yeah, I think Jurassic Park, the movie, is a great example for me. What's so clever about that movie to me, and the book is excellent as well, is people think it's about dinosaurs, and they think the real appeal of that movie is, oh, there's a T-Rex and he's going to flip over the car and there's all this action, and that's fine, and that's entertaining. But what really makes that movie so great is two things. Number one is the dialogue, which is funny when you think about it. It's like there's dinosaurs and the real star of the show is the dialogue. If you really go back and pay attention to what the characters are saying and then compare it to other movies, you will realize that it is the dialogue. And there's so many like quotable moments from that movie. That's not a mistake. It's directly lifted from Michael Crichton's writing. And he's, in some ways, I think, an underrated writer. And the other thing about that movie is that it does have those bigger themes that are really important. It's the disaster capitalism, it's the greed, it's the playing God with science, all those kind of questions and a lot of that's driven by Ian Malcolm, the character Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum. And he kind of asks those questions or says, you were so preoccupied if you could, you never stopped to think if you should, that kind of thing. And those are real legitimate concerns as we progress through modern medical technology and science. And so and then you look at the Jurassic World, the modern spinoffs, and they're the complete opposite. It literally is just about the big explosions and the dinosaurs, and let's make a hybrid T-Rex raptor, and the bigger and scarier and crazier, and that's why those movies suck. Again, you can sit down and watch them and be entertained for 90 minutes or whatever, but they don't ask those same questions that the original movie and book did. And that's why a lot of the hardcore fans of the first film and book, they're just like, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I think kind of a high mark of good literature or good art, whether it's visual, like photography or paintings, or like a movie or a TV show or something like that. Like, I think there should be kind of levels or layers to it. Like you were just talking about, like with Jurassic Park, like you can watch it and ask all these questions and be driven to think about the questions that the movie is asking and the ideas that it's presenting. Or you can just sit there and watch it and be entertained.
Sure.
Yeah,
so you can approach it from two different ways.
Right.
At least.
Right. I'll bring up, I'm trying not to bring up Gravity's Rainbow again, but
God damn it, Andy.
so we'll bring like something like, like one of Don DeLillo's books. Like we'll talk about White Noise. You can read that book and it's kind of a wacky, absurdist, following the life of this kind of stereotypical caricature of a Midwestern family and their kind of satirized American life. And you can read the book, or hopefully not watch the movie, but read the book and be entertained by it, like kind of get a laugh out of these kind of goofy characters and be entertained by their life and what's going on and the kind of situations they deal with. Or you can stop and think, like, what is DeLillo saying?
Yeah.
Like, what is he using these characters to say about American life?
Yeah.
There's a kind of passage or a section out of the book where the family and one of the new friends that the Jack Gladney, the protagonist, has made. I think he's the newest professor at the school. If I'm remembering correctly, he would be Don Cheadle's character in the movie. They go to this like tourist attraction, and the tourist attraction is the most photographed barn in America.
Nice.
There's nothing special about it.
Yeah.
It's just been photographed more than any other barn in America.
Who's keeping those stats?
Mr. DeLillo, we have some questions for you. And you can just read that section and just laugh at these kind of absurdity of people going to look at a barn that's not special in any way. It's just been photographed more than any other barn. Mm-hmm. Or you can stop and try to parse it down and think about what is DeLillo trying to say about the people that are there photographing this taking time out of their day just to see a plain Jane barn, or the type of people that would go and see that, or the type of society that would make that a major attraction.
Yeah.
I think if we want to talk about something more modern, we talked at length about Same Bed, Different Dreams last week. If you just read that at kind of the surface level, it's just kind of this intriguing story about a guy reading a book about this kind of secret Korean history.
Yeah.
And some intermixed narratives about people that are related to the protagonist reading the narrative and that history of Korea, and like how that kind of all intermixes. And it's on the surface level, it's very entertaining. But if you just dig a little deeper, like, I don't know how well of a job I did, but this is kind of what I was trying to get at when we talked about it last week. Like, you can examine, like, what is history? I said it last week, like, there's a reason Park included that quote.
Yeah, he hits on it a lot.
It's a little on the nose, and not in a bad way. Like, this is the question that the book is asking.
Yeah. And
behind that, underneath the layer of that entertaining narrative, like, that's the big picture idea. And you kind of brought up some of the racism aspects in that, and the way that your stereotypical American might look at any Asian person and not consider, like, is this person Korean? Are they Japanese? Are they Chinese? Are they North Korean, South Korean, whatever? Yeah. And if you just read that passage and take it at face value, it's kind of a funny little goof about how some guy in a parking lot thought this Korean person was a fake NHL player.
Right.
Like, that's just kind of a silly, goofy thing.
Yeah.
But if you stop, and you brought it up perfectly, like, that's pretty racist that the dude was just like, oh, you're the
right.
the
And that
NHL guy.
probably happens quite a bit.
Right. And there's some things you can use out of that to, like, examine American culture or any Western culture, really. You can use it to self-reflect, things like that.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the high mark. Like I said, the high mark of good art is there's a surface value, entertainment, and enjoyment that can be had from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the deeper understanding. And I think with some of the stuff that's pop fiction-y, you know, they have that layer of entertainment value, and maybe you can get a little bit, you know, you might get some like, you might be moved emotionally. You might maybe be stirred to think a little bit. There might be some self-inspection there, but like, I just don't think there's that real deeper layer.
Yeah.
Like, I think with a good work of literature, whether it be novels, poetry, short stories, you know, the definition I read alluded to history and biography and things like that. I think in a certain sense, maybe you could include those, at least certain works of nonfiction. You know, I think in a good work of literature, it's kind of, to a degree, limitless, to the sense that you can keep digging. Like, you can just get out what you put in, versus like something like Iron Flame or the Court of Whatever and Whatever series.
Yeah.
You know, like,
insert 2 nouns.
right. You can be entertained.
Yeah.
You can maybe, I'm going to assume there's characters in there that are assholes and characters in there that are good guys. And you can maybe, like, maybe you're reading the character that's the bad guy and you're like, oh, you know, sometimes I'm kind of like that. Maybe I shouldn't be.
Sure.
Maybe I shouldn't talk to my mom or friend or significant other or whoever like that. And then that's kind of the end.
Well, you talk about the literature typically has layers. And so far we've talked a lot about literature being not so much about characters, but maybe bigger concepts. But I do think literature can be about characters, and those layers exist within the characters as well.
Absolutely.
One of the defining things for me about kind of regular just fiction versus literature is I think a lot of pop fiction or just pop culture media in general is very black and white. These are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and people are kind of one-dimensional. Where really good stories that are character driven really make you hate yourself for feeling empathy for the bad guy.
Right.
Not to stay on Jurassic Park, but I think that's a good example of that, where in the original movie and in the book, the bad guy isn't actually the dinosaurs. They're just doing what animals do.
Right.
The real bad guy is the old guy. Why do I always forget his name whenever we talk about him?
I don't know.
Jesus Christ, this is embarrassing. But, you know, it's like he has these grandiose plans of opening this park, and yeah, he wants to make some money, but he also talks in the movie about like, oh, you know, it's not just going to be for the ultra rich. We're going to let, you know, everyone's going to experience this, and on its face value, it seems like he is a good guy,
Right.
but he's actually not. He talks about how he spared no expense, but the whole movie's about how he cut corners to save money because he's just a capitalist and he's profit driven. And I think Shogun by James Clavell does a great job of kind of flipping that switch. Like, for those who aren't familiar with that novel, it's in feudal Japan, which is very hierarchical. And so you have like someone at the top of the food chain, actually someone at the middle of the food chain comes down on somebody below them. And you're like, wow, that character sucks. Like, I can't wait for that guy to get beheaded.
Right.
And then you learn more about that character's backstory, and he has somebody above him coming down on him, and he's in this predicament where if things don't get fixed, that he's screwed.
Right.
And then you're starting to be like, oh no, like I feel bad for that guy, you know? Like
Right.
it's not, he was being a jerk because he's in a pickle. So I think that kind of making you feel empathy for the quote unquote villain, where like more pop stuff, it's very much like, this is the bad guy and this is the good guy. This is who you root for. This is who you root against. And that is clearly very appealing to broader audiences because, you know, humans are kind of dumb animals at the end of the day, where we're very tribalistic. And it's like, you know, look at left wing versus right wing, Republican versus, you know, liberal. People are so like anyone on this side of the fence is bad. And there's that binary thinking. That's not really a good way to do things. And I think good literature does that. Same thing with Game of Thrones. That was a great series as far as the show is concerned. I haven't read the books because I refuse to read a series that's not completed. But that show does a great job of making you hate somebody and then later making you feel some empathy for them.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have that guilt because you're like, oh, I'm supposed to hate this guy, but now
you know
it's
what?
kinda won me
What
over.
show does a great job of that? And I actually wrote a pretty lengthy paper about when I was in college. Is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Because like if you watch that show, like
John Hammond. Sorry, that's the character in Jurassic Park. I always blank on it what we're talking about. Go ahead. Always Sunny.
we didn't lose that camera, right?
Just the monitor.
Okay. So if you're watching like Always Sunny, the characters on it are objectively shitty, awful people.
Yeah.
And if you watch like other sitcoms, like obviously most popular television is going to at some point or another kind of bring up societal issues. At some point you pick your kind of classic 90s sitcom, Family Matters, Fresh Prince, some of those other things like issues of racism are going to come up. And sometimes I'm trying to think of how to phrase this without getting canceled, but like sometimes it's a little heavy-handed. It's a little obvious, like the guy that said the N-word is not cool. You're not supposed to act like that. But when you have It's Always Sunny, you have these characters that are objectively bad. They do racist things. And you're supposed to have that switch go like, oh, those people suck. I shouldn't be like that. Like it's kind of the reverse
Right.
of like where you have your protagonists of the show and bad things happen to them.
Yeah.
And you watch and you're like, oh, I don't want to be like the people doing the bad things. And with It's Always Sunny, it's the opposite. Like they're awful people doing awful things. There's you saying kind of how people are so hardline, right or left or whatever. There's an episode early on in the show that I actually referenced in this paper that I wrote where it's about the abortion debate. And this episode is probably like 10, 12 years old at this point. So it's before things got as hot as they were now.
Yeah.
And you have a couple of characters who their opinion on whether abortion should be legal or the woman should have the right to choose or whatever, they're trying to get laid. And like there's one character, like this woman's like, oh, abortion's evil. You shouldn't do it. And he's like, yeah, I agree with you. And she doesn't want to sleep with him. So he kind of switches sides. And the end of the episode, it's kind of showing how there's like this nuance and other things is going on. One of the they're at this like mass protest where on one side you have people that are pro-life and on the other side you have people that are pro-choice. And the characters kind of keep jumping back from which side they're on. And the episode ends with one character literally stuck on top of a fence he was trying to climb. He's sitting on the fence and both sides are pelting him with eggs.
Nice.
And like, it's again, like I was saying with good art, like on the surface, it's entertaining. Like you're watching this awful person get pelted with eggs. But
there's a metaphor.
There's metaphors in there.
Yeah. So let's begin to wrap this up because we're already an hour and 15 in. Let's briefly talk about which works, if any, we think will be considered classics that are modern now, but in the future will be considered classics. I have a theory about this, but I want to hear your picks first.
I was thinking about this. Like, I think it's hard to come up with something. Obviously, for a number of reasons, it's hard to like just kind of pick a list, like speculate on what isn't going to be. deemed as a classic. But I think if you look back at a lot of say early 20th century and prior classics, to some degree there is a lot of, not similarity, but they have common characteristics. I think a lot of those books are based around those kind of 5 types of stories that we talked about. You know, there's a reason why students in English classes are taught there's 5 types of story. Like,
Right.
people didn't just like make that up. It
Right.
came from somewhere. And I think as time goes on, the types of fiction that people write, the types of things, stories that are being written, the manner in which they are written is changing. You know, I think I can't think of any book classic that I've read where the plot wasn't linear. Like the perspective of the character might change. Like you might have one passage that's from this character's perspective and you might switch to this person's, yada, yada. But I can't think of any, and I'm not saying they don't exist. I just can't think of any where like it starts off going this way and then you jump back X amount of time, or you jump, you know, things kind of shift and it's not clear like what direction the narrative is going in, or, you know, things like that. I think structurally things have changed. Obviously that's kind of something that was brought up with like the postmodern movement and like post-structuralist type stuff is people started to play with a lot more of just like, so I think the array of what can be captured is so much wider now. Like it's a lot harder to speculate. So I don't know. I don't really have a tight like theory right now. I think you could probably, I also don't know how, I was struggling to think of like how far back to go. Like if you think about it, again, if you're at home, take a shot, because I'm going to bring up Gravity's Rainbow again. Like anyone that is, you know, knowledgeable to some degree about literature has probably heard of that book.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like even people that don't read know who Stephen King is.
Right.
But people that are even like somewhat interested in more literary texts have probably heard of Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
They're at least aware of it. And, you know, I think a lot of people that are more knowledgeable about it would already consider it a classic.
I would say so. I mean, stuff from the 70s, yeah.
But if you think about it, like it's 50 years old.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, that's not that old. Like that's still a more modern work. Well, compared to something like Dostoevsky or Dickens or Jane, like, you know, pick your kind of classic literature starter pack.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with those books or I'm critiquing those books in any way, but like those books are hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
Comparatively speaking, Gravity's Rainbow and Pynchon's other works and some of DeLillo's texts, and
it begs the question though, like at what point did people say Dickens was classic?
Right.
I don't know.
I know. Yeah.
I don't know if there's even a record of that when people started referring to it as classic.
Right.
For me, I think if anything, honestly, for me, like anything older than 30 years.
Yeah.
Especially now with how quickly things progress and information is communicated. If it's older than 30 years old, I consider it a classic. Using music as an example, a lot of 90s grunge stuff is starting to be considered classic rock,
right,
or be played on classic rock radio, where for me, in my generation, when I think of classic rock, I think of like Creedence Clearwater Revival from the 70s.
Right.
Or,
It's like dad rock.
yeah, it's even, or maybe even like Elvis from the 60s or
Right.
whatever. So,
I think it's also hard too because there's a lot of stuff that has come out in the last 20 years that maybe hasn't grown to prominence yet, but like is really good literature. Like I was thinking about it a little bit. It kind of played around with the idea of like talking about a topic like this. I was kind of thinking about William Gaddis.
mm-hmm.
So The Recognitions, which came out in 1955, was his first novel. When it first came out, it got terrible reviews.
Yeah.
There are at least one, maybe 2 or 3 books that have been published about how unfair those reviews were.
Nice.
And not just like there are stories about how the people that read reviews like later admitted they didn't actually read the book.
Oh, good.
Or they only read the blurb,
Sure.
or they read like the first half of the book or things like that.
Yeah.
And
It's a classic version of bad reads
Right.
on Instagram.
right. So, the book got trashed and nobody really read it.
Yeah.
And then when his second novel, JR, came out in 1975, authors that maybe were influenced by his style with The Recognitions or had a similar style, like when JR came out, it was compared to Pynchon and Joseph Heller and maybe Salinger as well. That kind of like irreverent style.
Yeah.
But if you follow the timeline, The Recognitions came out before any of those
All
books.
that stuff. Yeah.
And, that's not to say those books wouldn't exist without
Yeah.
the
But it took
recognitions.
them to make it cool.
Right. So who's to say there are books like that out there now who...
I think what concerns me and what makes it so difficult to pick out specific authors or modern titles that will be considered classics is if you look at when Dickens came out, it was popular.
Right.
I think we talked about this off camera a long time ago, just like in the early 20s and 30s, authors like Steinbeck and Hemingway and Fitzgerald, those dudes were celebrities.
They were cool.
They were cool. They were considered, their books were considered high art then, well-regarded literature.
Right.
Great writing, great storytelling, all checks all the boxes that we've talked about today, and they were popular. Where I really struggle to think of anything that has that level of literary quality to it that is also popular. So I can't help but wonder if is the Hunger Games in 50 years, is that going to be considered the classics from this era? Where for us, they're maybe not necessarily bad stories, and they do kind of start to peel back the curtain on some of those bigger themes, but they're really not that satisfying to like hardcore literature fans. Because I struggle to think of anything. There's some works from the past that weren't popular when they came out and are now considered, great works of literature. But I just wonder if is Thomas Pynchon ultimately going to be forgotten in 200 years time? Are people really going to be going, like Pynchon? It's just like, I don't know, man. I don't see it happening the same way as it did, with 1950 and earlier. I would say is kind of the cutoff there.
Yeah.
So
I don't disagree because he certainly does not have the like mainstream popularity that something like The Hunger Games or some of these other like more recent fantasy type novels. As far as I can tell, like everyone is losing their minds about these like Fourth Wing books. Like I think I had told you this. I was at Barnes and Noble a couple months ago, and like I'm in line, And the woman in front of me was pre-ordering a copy of the second book in the series or whatever, and she didn't even know the title.
Yeah.
She was just like, I know it's the sequel to.
Yeah.
And that kind of popularity was kind of insane to me.
Yeah, you're going to read it no matter what. You don't care.
Right.
You're not going to wait to see what other people think or
right. Yeah. And it's kind of like, does a book like that have the redeeming qualities that are going to make it last, or is it just like a flash in the pan that's going to be forgotten once the next fantasy story with a flashy cover comes out?
So a book like that, and I have not read it, so it's not really super fair of me to judge it in this way, but a book like that, I would say no. Like that is probably also going to be forgotten by time. I do think it's it's going to be those books that have that attempt of a balance between pop fiction and just starting to approach bigger themes. And I think like Hunger Games is a good example of that. There is some themes about capitalism and class warfare and the difference between right and wrong. And there are some themes there. It doesn't necessarily do a great job of exploring those.
Right.
And ultimately, I do think people watch that movie and read that book more for what happens to PETA. You know what I mean? Where that's not really the point. But I think books like that were very popular, but do have some small bit of those elements will probably be considered the classics. And I think within really niche circles, of course, like people, whoever is the you and me version of in 200 years will probably know Pynchon.
I think the thing with Pynchon's work and Gravity's Rainbow especially, like if you look at the things he was saying in that book that was published in 73 and written between, I don't know, say some point in the early 60s and 72, you know, I think if you go back, I read that quote on when we talked about our favorite passages about how it's not really political. It's all these firms working in accordance to increase their funding and yada, yada, yada. And he used World War II to discuss these kind of themes about how like on the surface level, like this war is political. It's the U.S. versus Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. But in the book, it's these corporations are on either side of the Allies and the Axis and powers, and they're making money and growing no matter which side comes out on top.
Yeah.
And if you dig deep into the themes of what he was discussing in that book, it's pretty applicable to what took place 20 years ago in the Middle East, or 30, 40 years ago in the Middle East, 20 years ago in the Middle East, and today in the Middle East.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I did mention this in the beginning, but I'm also still listening to Lawrence in Arabia, the audiobook. It's very long. It's like 30 hours. And there's someone in the book, William Yale, his name is, and he works for a company called Saucony, and they were an oil company, an American oil company. Mm-hmm. And they had to set up all these like shell corporations because they wanted to sell oil to Turkey and Germany and to the Triple Entente. And they wanted to double dip and make their money, and people got pissed about it.
Yeah.
Same thing.
You know, I think if you look at it, like books that are already classics now, like your Dostoevskys, your Dickens, your Austens, Hemingway, whoever, you know, they I think their books were a little bit more targeted at human nature than whatever the hell you want to say Pynchon was trying to target.
Yeah.
But what they say about human nature is still relevant.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a reason that
People haven't really changed that much.
like there's a reason that kids in high school study Crime and Punishment and those books. There's a reason that kids study John Steinbeck and Mice and Men and The Pearl. Like those books are still relevant for a reason. People still read them.
Yeah.
There's still things that can be discussed. I think it's going to be the same thing with your Pynchons, your DeLillos, your Gasses, Gaddises.
I hope so.
These kind of postmodern titans, if you will, that like maybe didn't have that kind of like release day popularity that Dickens had in his time and Joyce and Steinbeck and Fitzgerald had in their time. But the critiques they're making and the things they're satirizing are still relevant.
Yeah.
You know, there's scenes in the Recognitions where they're at, they go to these like kind of wild parties and you'll get like 20, 30, 40 pages, whatever the length of that party scene is, where the majority of it is just like unattributed dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like bits and pieces of, and you'll get part of a conversation on one page and then it'll kind of drift off to another couple characters talking, and then it comes back in, you're getting all these bits and pieces, and it's all very vain. They're not really talking about anything important. They're either talking about their like some superficial thing that they've done, like this new bag that they got or this trip they're going on, or they're trying to sound smart, or they're talking down about someone else. And maybe the medium has changed, but it's just a lot of noise. And I think that's something that is going to continue and go on. Like, you know, if you're doom scrolling or whatever, like you get sucked into the void of TikTok, Reels, YouTube Shorts, whatever, like you're getting this kind of infinite stream of information and it's all just noise.
Yeah.
Especially if, you know, I think most people maybe listening have kind of seen the like meme where it's like, okay, I'm going to end my day after staring at the medium screen by staring at the little screen while something on the big screen is playing in the background.
Yeah.
Like you just have this influx of noise.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, like that those kind of scenes in the Recognitions remind me of that. Obviously, white noise
that's what it's about.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that like consumerism. You know, most of that book lots of scenes in that book take place in these overly lit, brightly packed, overly packed grocery stores. We've all had that like experience where you go into a grocery store, the fluorescent lighting is crazy.
Yeah.
There's too many people in there. There's someone's calling for someone to go to the cashier over the loudspeaker. As soon as that person's done, an ad for this product, you know, like there's that consumerism angle to it, and there's that influx of information. And I don't think, given the current trajectory of our society, like that's not going to change.
No, I don't think so either.
I don't think anytime soon we're going to become less consumeristic.
Right.
Like, you know, and I think for that reason, those books that are on the kind of fringe of being widely known and niche. I think that's why maybe even though they weren't as popular in real time, I think that's why those are going to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
I just think they're more prescient than modern day stuff, more modern day fiction that, you know, I agree with everything you said about the Hunger Games. Like, it was super popular. It does kind of start to approach some of those loftier topics that you're going to get more of in some of the works that I was referencing. But, and granted, I maybe read like the first one. I didn't see any of the movies. That was one that just kind of like, I think I was like in middle school, high school when those started to come out. And for whatever reason, like I just never read them. I didn't really catch on. So maybe I'm off base, but like those just don't feel as prescient to me. Like,
well, I hope you're right. I hope they are teaching people like Pynchon and DeLillo in schools, you know, in 50, 60, 100 years time. I don't know that I'm as positive about it as I might be a little more pessimistic than you are, but should we wrap this up?
I don't know if I'm optimistic. I'm just, I'm being hopeful. I think, you know, I'm hoping for the best and expecting the worst. I mean, you know, maybe before any of these books are even old enough to be classics, we'll have spiraled even further and all books will be banned and
books will just be emojis.
We'll be living in a Fahrenheit 451.
You'll open up a book, it'll just be a string of symbols. You know.
Okay, I actually have seen a book. There's this bookstore on the Cape that I go to every time I visit my parents, and they have a copy. They have had multiple copies. I've never bought one because it's $70.
Jesus.
It's Emoji Dick.
Oh God.
And apparently, like what they did, I forget exactly what it was, but they like took Moby Dick, obviously in English, and I think they took other translations of it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of fed them into like an algorithm or something.
Nice.
And then it had it like rewrite Moby Dick entirely using emojis.
I don't want to live on this planet
anymore.
And
there's something about it. Like I'm with you. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, that's very tongue in cheek, obviously.
Right. You know, I don't think
Emoji Dick.
Right. You're not going to do that. Maybe someone's going to try and do that with like some other weighty tome like that. But you're right. It's not going to have that same kind of playful title.
Yeah.
I think if I I still haven't read Moby Dick. Maybe if I had and really enjoyed it and had a greater appreciation for it, maybe I would want to pick this up as like a goof. But like I see it and I get a kick out of it every time. Like
$70 is a lot for a goof.
Right.
So.
Right.
All right. Well,
I think that's a good ending point.
Good place to end. Please join the conversation. What do you think constitutes as literature, and which modern works do you think will be cataloged as the Western canon literature in the future? Looking back. So, yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
If you have anything you want to hear us talk about, and you know, I think for a couple of dumb monkeys, we came up with something. Maybe not Hamlet, but
there was no Shakespeare today on offer.
If you want to hear us ramble about anything else or have any ideas for us, fire away.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.